Hello everyone and welcome to the download again from 24 IT Services. We've actually got a really interesting show lined up today. We've got some really, some juicy topics to discuss in the news, and it's one of those shows where I'm scared, is it going to go on for like 90 minutes or like 2 hours? Because yet again, we are joined by my co-host for this week, Sarah.
Hi.
So Sarah's joined me again today because my scheduled co-host for today unfortunately had to head over to Liverpool. And then my backup co-host for today then told me this morning, unfortunately, I've got to go down to London. So, Sarah, do you mind filling in? So, Sarah's back with us on the show today and still holds the record for the longest show. I think you were worried when we had Mark on last week that you were
Very.
going to be out surpassed, let's say, with the longest show
Yeah, yeah.
record. How are you doing today, Sarah?
I'm all right, thank you. I am still moaning about it being too hot because it is.
It's been a little bit warm in your home office this past week, hasn't it?
It's topped out, I think, at about 28, 29, and I'm just checking now, it's 26, so it's slightly better,
Yeah.
but it is still ginger killing weather, so it's
I
too
don't
much.
know. A little bit better though. A little bit better. I
A
mean,
little bit
in the
better.
office at the moment, I have a little thermometer behind me. It's 23 degrees, which is far better than it was a few weeks ago when like it was like 41 degrees or something in my
Yeah, it was
office.
madness. So remember you telling me, I'm like, no, 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 that's
I
not
was
acceptable.
absolutely melting. So I'm
Yeah.
glad that this past few days we've got the AC fixed. We've got some nice like solar shade window film on the outside of the building. Much better in this office at the moment. But let's have a look at some of the tech, AI, and cyber news over this past week. Now we don't really have M&S to talk about. I'm sorry, Sarah. I
No.
might be able to link it back. Let's see. So, news story out of Australia today as Qantas has announced that hackers have been able to access the database of more than 6 million customer accounts. The breach contains names, email addresses, phone numbers, birth dates, and even frequent flyer numbers. This comes as reports have surfaced this past week that Scattered Spider, and here's the relevance, the group behind the M&S cyber attack, and you'll find a way to include it, have been named in connection with a rise in targeted attacks on the airline industry around the globe. In the case of Qantas, attackers gained access via a call center to be able to gain access to a third party customer service platform. Qantas have not yet announced how the breach occurred, but they have said that they're still investigating the breach, which they have confirmed did not include passwords, user login details, or PIN numbers. However, the CEO, Vanessa Hudson, did say, "We recognise the uncertainty that this will cause," and went on to say, "Our customers trust us with their personal information, and we take that responsibility seriously." Of course, this is still a developing news story, but what is scary is that Scattered Spider and hacking groups around the world are turning on the aerospace industry. So, if airlines or the aerospace industry, like I say, are now being targeted, how long do you think, Sarah, is it before we potentially see another global impact, such as the CrowdStrike outage that we had this past year?
I think it's coming. I genuinely think it's coming. I think if you look at what they've done and the sort of industries that they've targeted, so they've targeted retail.
Yeah.
They're now targeting sort of like probably, is it the biggest industry, I guess, globally, flights and stuff like that, aerospace.
I would
It
say
would,
it's one of the biggest industries
yeah, yeah.
globally,
Some,
yes.
yeah, outside of stuff like healthcare, maybe,
Yeah.
the biggest sort of like non-healthcare related sector is probably, if you think about how many flights are in the air at any one time, the amount of data that's like being
Oh, yeah,
generated,
definitely.
it kind of makes sense because they're doing something that they can basically hit the
Yeah.
the biggest amount of people with. And if you think about, how popular flights are now,
Yeah.
yeah, I am not a frequent flyer by any stretch of the other imagination, but my other half is. He
Yeah.
flies quite regularly for business. So if you think about the amount of data that he generates, I mean, he's been in America 3 times already this year. He's
Yeah.
he's off again at the end of the month. So he's just like a normal business person. Do you know what I mean? So the amount of data that they can get hold of
Yeah. And like even short haul
makes sense.
flights. We went over
Yeah.
to Dublin for an industry event only a couple of
Mm.
weeks back, and it actually was cheaper to fly
Yeah.
from Leeds to Dublin than it was to get the train from Doncaster to London.
Yeah.
That's
Madness.
ridiculous.
Madness. But it's kind of like a ready-made source of data, isn't it?
It
That's
is.
got useful, in inverted commas, information.
For the
So
hackers,
it's
at the
got
very
like,
least. Like,
yeah,
frequent flyer numbers alone, like, allows these hackers to be able to then target these individuals if they're frequently flying to certain destinations.
mm,
Oh, reach out as the airline as a
yeah,
phishing email and say, oh, we need to contact you about your upcoming flight to wherever. If they're
yeah,
regularly flying to that, I don't know, once a month or twice a year or something like that, more than
mm,
likely people have some of these flights booked well in advance, and
yeah,
they
yeah.
they become easy targets.
It's not only that though. If you think about like the reward schemes that are
Yeah,
attached to frequent flyer stuff, so like we used to when we were flying to Germany, we used to fly Lufthansa a lot. So
yeah,
we joined their reward scheme and we regularly get sort of stuff sent in the post, brochures of the things that you can buy with your 90 million frequent flyer miles.
yeah,
It takes you like you have to fly to Germany 25 times a year to get an umbrella or something. But that kind of stuff as well, it's another avenue, isn't it,
it
where
is.
people could be targeted. So it's not just the actual flight bit,
Yeah,
it's the bits around that. So, like, even, potentially they could get into like car hire
yeah.
agencies. There's all sorts of spin off from this. So
There
it
are
kind of
lots of
makes
other
sense.
connected industries and
Mm,
other industries in the supply chain
yeah,
for aerospace and
yeah,
airlines and different things like that
yeah,
that could then be affected. And
yeah.
I suppose Qantas, we now know that they've been attacked. They've informed the Australian Cybersecurity Centre, Office for Australian Information Commissioner, and also the
Mm,
Australian Federal Police. But how long is it until we see now another airline suffer a similar attack? Whether it's someone as big as your Qantas or maybe
mm,
BA or people like that,
yeah.
or some of your smaller airlines even as well. It's
Yeah,
a ticking
I
time
can't
bomb.
imagine it's long. I
Yeah,
reckon, given the pace of what happened with like the Marks and Spencers co-op
yeah.
and associated attacks, I reckon probably within the next 10 days there'll be something else.
And you would think that, well, to be fair, you would think this of retail as well, but you would think that the aerospace industry would have more of a handle on cybersecurity and things like
Mm,
that. But
yeah,
it just goes to show that no matter the industry, no matter the size, people can still be vulnerable. And in the case of this, they've got in through a call center into a third party customer service platform. And it's important that businesses understand the tools and areas of their supply chain where they could potentially still be
mm,
vulnerable.
yeah. I mean, if you look at call centers, having worked in and around call centers before, they tend to have a high turnover of staff.
Yeah,
It's a bit like when you look at like logistics and warehousing, warehouse staff tend to be a high turnover sort of industry.
yeah,
And with that, it's a sad state of affairs. Like you've really got to keep on top of like cybersecurity training with those members of staff because they turn over so quickly. If you only do like a program sort of like once every 6 months or once a
yeah.
year, there's a good chance that people are not being caught in that and having to do that
And you
training.
need an
So it's kind of
essential onboard process as well for new
yeah,
starters. Like,
yeah,
these are the primary things that you need to look out for. I
yeah,
remember working back when I was in manufacturing, we had a new starter who joined the company, and before even their email security was active, someone had gotten into their new starter, must have just been targeting names,
yeah,
and sent them a phishing email pretending to be the managing director.
yeah,
Like, these are essential things that people need to be aware of when they're starting
yeah,
at a new company, as well as
yeah.
that ongoing training.
And particularly if you think about places like call centers and stuff like that, where you're handling a high volume of data,
Yeah.
it just takes one transaction, doesn't it? It's like with the Marks and Spencers thing, it's just one transaction
Yeah, getting in
that
through
can
their IT
open that
support
door.
provider, just
Mm,
not having the right processes in place,
mm,
or that person that they were talking to not understanding the right procedure to be
yeah,
able to
yeah.
process the type of request that they were receiving.
And I think the sad fact about this is not us being hysterical on a
No,
Wednesday afternoon. This
no,
is this is literally how it is. It's not sort of like it's not been what do they call it when, you know, like when they add a dramatization to things, it's not
Yeah,
been enhanced for dramatic effect. This is literally what happens. It's kind of like just one person, which is why we always talk about, don't we, about humans are the
yeah,
weak link in this chain. It's like one small action can cause numerous sort of effects afterwards, can't it?
it can do. It can do.
Mm.
Let's have a look at our second news story for today. Let's switch pace from cybersecurity into a little bit of AI news. So we've talked previously, and I think it was actually yourself that I was talking to on the podcast about
Mm.
copyright and
Yes.
AI content. And a federal judge in San Francisco this past week has ruled that the AI company Anthropic, behind the Claude platform, who trained their model using published books without the permissions of authors, stumbling over my words a little bit, but apparently
Mm.
he's ruled that they did not breach copyright law because the content that they produced from those books was transformative, by which it means that the platform would not be producing a word for word output of the original content. Anthropic said that they were pleased of the ruling and the recognition that their use of this content was consistent with copyright's purpose in enabling creativity and fostering scientific progress. Judge William Alsup, I think that's how you pronounce that, did state that Anthropic copying and storing 7 million pirated books. How do you get 7 million pirated books?
God knows.
Anyway, copying and storing 7 million pirated books in a central library did infringe on the copyright of authors and was not fair use. However, the company later bought millions of printed books as well as this, which did fall under those fair use of the materials. He did, however, say that Anthropic later bought a copy of the book it earlier stole from the internet will not absolve them of liability for theft, but it may affect the extent of statutory damages that they will incur. This is apparently then going to be looked at later this year. It is worth noting that there are other similar cases that are currently being reviewed, both in the US and around the world, and that a decision on this could then set a precedent for those other trials as well as in other media as well, such as music, film, and TV. John Strand, a copyright lawyer for the US law firm Wolf Greenfield, said said that the decision from a well-respected judge was very significant, and went on to say that due to this large number of other AI copyright cases working their way through the legal system at the moment, that the expectation is that at some point the primary question of whether training these large language models on copyrighted materials is fair use will likely be later addressed in the US Supreme Court, as well as other courts and governments around the world. So, I suppose the question for yourself, Sarah, on this is, do you think that training tools like Anthropic's Claude or ChatGPT, Google Gemini, on copyrighted materials such as books, movies, and music, or even works of art, is right? And I suppose from that, what are the impacts of the original owners of those materials?
Oh, you give me a good one, don't you?
I
You give
like
me
to
a good
give
one.
you a stumped
Like
question
to
to
make me
like,
work on a
I
Wednesday.
do, yeah,
I
get the
think this
mind
is a
going.
really tricky one. We've talked about sort of like legal sort of implications of AI and stuff before, and we've both said many, many, many times we are not legal
No, we're
experts.
not.
So, you know, none of this is like qualified advice at all. But I think it's an interesting one because the way that I try and look at it is can I take that scenario out of AI, for
Yeah,
example? So if I was at uni, which I was a long, long time ago, and I was using materials for research and I cited those materials,
yeah,
that isn't plagiarism. Yeah, so I would have not got a roasting by my lecturers for plagiarizing somebody else's stuff.
yeah,
Not that you can
because it's
really
transformative
plagiarize.
at that point, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's the way that I look at it. I mean, it's like I was lucky in some respects that I didn't have to do a dissertation. I did an engineering IT course, so there was
Yeah,
no way I was writing 20,000 words about why Ohm's law was Ohm's law. You know, it's kind of there's not much that I could have plagiarized,
yeah,
but obviously I was mates with a lot of people who were doing like other courses where they did have to write stuff, and I just
yeah,
remember the anxiety of people at the time. So this is, you know, before we were using ChatGPT and all this kind
yeah,
of stuff, but they were so anxious about quality referencing
Yeah.
within their dissertations, because if they didn't reference it properly, it could be seen as plagiarism.
Yeah.
And I think that's where my brain is going to with this, because I think we are training AI on the data that's out there.
Yeah.
And if you think about, they bought thousands and thousands of books. How do you get the consent from everybody who has produced a piece of information, for want of a better word,
Exactly.
in their whole entire world?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like you can't literally get consent from everybody, but
No.
what you can say is that, a bit like a uni dissertation in my head, if you are using this directly, then it has to be referenced.
Yeah. And I think
It's
just to interrupt for a second,
mm,
in my head, where they've purchased a single book and are then using it to train an AI platform that's then going to output content based on that. I mean, if I went and bought a Blu-ray from HMV and then decided to put up a projector screen outside the office and then charge people to come and watch a movie that I purchased from HMV, you couldn't do that. That's not within
no,
copyright law. Yes, I'm putting on a public event. It's a transformative experience, XYZ. That's not within copyright law.
no.
Now, maybe if you decided to purchase all of the, I don't know, Lord of the Rings films as an example, and then cut out all of the best bits of the story so that it condenses the equivalent of like 12 hours worth of a movie into maybe just 3 hours, would that be then considered as transformative works? Are you transforming the original material enough, or are you still using copyrighted content?
You see, I would say that's still copyright content, isn't it?
Me
Because you're
too.
literally just
Exactly.
chopping it up. But what I think what they're saying with this is, if the AI model has read this book and then is kind of interpreting that,
Yes.
it's an interesting one, because I saw, and I'm trying to think when it was a few years ago. There was a whole thing about, and this is a bit off kilter, but recipes being copyrighted.
Yeah.
So
Oh, I've
like,
seen about this, yeah.
was it Jack Monroe? I think it was Jack
I'm
Monroe
not sure. I think there was a
took
couple of different
somebody to
ones at the
court.
time, yeah.
Yeah, because she'd created a recipe and she'd like published it in a book, and somebody else had kind of stolen that, for want of a better
Yeah.
word. The only reason that I think it actually was upheld as a breach of copyright was because the method was nigh on identical.
Yeah.
And that's a really, really tricky one in my brain, because it's like, there's only so many, it wasn't a cheese sandwich, but there's only so many ways to make a cheese sandwich.
Yeah.
You cannot copyright the process of making a cheese sandwich. It's like there are lots and lots of recipes out there. There are lots of drinks out there. There are all sorts of things that we can think of that are very similar. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like, for me, it's more, where do you draw the line of this being, like, say, plagiarism and like a direct cut and paste kind of thing,
Yeah.
or
Or is it
how much
transformative?
transformation has
Yeah.
to happen to that thing before it becomes something different?
So, and again, this is me playing devil's advocate a little bit. If you were to ask ChatGPT, Google Gemini, whichever platform of choice you want to go to, if you were to ask them, please describe what happens in each paragraph of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Phone, please now, Philosopher's Stone's first chapter. Like, if it was able to, paragraph by paragraph, give you an output of what exactly happens throughout that chapter, is that plagiarizing the source material, or is that transforming the original content?
This is where it gets a bit messy, isn't it?
It's a
This is the messy
challenging one.
bit.
It's a challenging one.
And I think this is why these sorts of cases are really, really important, because they're kind of, somebody at some point, as I think we've said before on other episodes, somebody at some point has got to sit down and say, right,
This
this is
is
where we're
right.
drawing the
This is
line in the
wrong.
sand.
Yeah.
This is what we're saying is acceptable use, or whatever. This is where, we are saying that if you lift word for word the first chapter of Philosopher's Stone, then that is bad.
Yeah.
What percentage of that needs to be different? I mean,
Yeah.
that's kind of taking it too literally, but if you were saying that if you've got like a word count of 10,000 words and 95% of that is the same, is that essentially the same thing, or is it something different? It's kind of like
Yeah.
you've got to be I think that prescriptive with it, because otherwise you're leaving yourself open to too many different interpretations, aren't you? And it's like,
Yeah.
where does that end up? Where does that take us? And it's kind of, it needs to be enforceable, which I guess is the other thing, isn't it? It's like, how
Yeah.
the heck do you say that this is actually, like with the Jack Monroe thing, how did she say this is my recipe? Because there's so many things that are similar.
Yeah.
You know,
And there are other examples similar to this. I mean, Sarah, you're a little bit of a nerd like myself. You've watched Star Wars. I know that the original trilogy was turned into a series of books as if they were written from the point of view of Shakespeare.
mm,
If you were to write, again, we'll use Harry Potter. If you were to write the Philosopher's Stone from the point of view of Shakespeare, or I don't know, all of the words had to come from Yorkshire dialect or something like that. Can you just imagine Harry Potter as a Yorkshireman?
yeah,
Would that be
totally.
transformative enough of the original content to be able to be publicly used and published? Again, it's very
It's
challenging. Very
it's the
challenging.
copyright of an idea, isn't it, as well,
Yeah,
if you think about, particularly in a creative sense, in a literary sense, or music or art or whatever. It's that interpretation. And I think the more sort of interpretive it is, so like if you think about, the written word is possibly easier,
yeah,
whereas like art, music, all those kind of things that are a bit more interpretive, that's going to be even more difficult, isn't it? Because how many paintings are there in the world that are of, like, like similar to like the Hay Wain or something?
yeah. How many
How can you
landscape
say that
paintings
you're,
can you have that look
yeah,
similar?
yeah, exactly.
Let's move
Tricky.
on to our third news story because it is kind of relevant. So
Mhm.
let's kind of continue on with these thoughts. Speaking of the use of AI in media, have you seen the news story this past week about the new indie rock band which has been making waves on Spotify with 500,000 listens over the past couple of weeks called Velvet Sundown? No,
I was
neither
not
have
aware
I.
of this
To
thing.
be fair, I don't listen to Spotify, I listen to Apple Music, but that's beside the point. But I was having a look at this when I was putting the news together earlier today, and all of the group pictures look like they've been used by AI, which is like 100% generated by AI. Like,
Yeah.
absolutely ridiculous. People have even looked into the band and they've not been able to prove that the musicians are real or if even played at a live event or just even exist at all. Um, apparently they have a Twitter or X profile where they've disputed these claims, but there are still many that believe that this content and the music that they're producing has been AI generated. It's important to consider with this that Spotify doesn't have a policy for labeling AI music, which is actually leading fans to feel misled by the platform's verified artist label that they have for Velvet Sundown, because it only
Hmm.
means that it's the artist's stream that they've been able to prove that they're the
Hmm.
ones uploading. Um, in May, Daniel Ek, who is Spotify's co-founder and chief executive, positively said of AI's impact on music, "I'm mostly optimistic and very excited because we're just in the beginning of understanding this future of creativity that we're entering. We want real humans. We want to make who want to make it as artists and creators. But what is creativity in the future with AI? I don't know. What even is music, I suppose, at that point?
Yeah.
But it's a really good question. I mean, Deezer, who another music streaming platform, said that
Mhm.
18% of all music uploaded to the platform on a daily basis, which is the equivalent of about 20,000 tracks, were 100% AI generated. And that 70% of those that were uploaded were fraudulent and risking crowding genuine artists out of the platform, basically. I mean, for Spotify, more specifically in this case, music business worldwide. Again, I'm reading this because I'd taken it from the notes that I was taking from multiple news stories. So, music business worldwide this week identified that there were 13 completely AI made artists on Spotify with a combined listening rate of 4.1 million monthly listens. That's massive.
Mm.
Just to say that this is kind of like a new sort of tool that people are using. But What do you think the impact could have on popular music if AI can be used to quickly make tracks that align with popular music trends, Sarah?
I love you say popular music. My music taste stopped at about 1992.
Yeah, well,
So
I
I'm
say
not down with
popular
the kids.
music.
I'm like old
I
school,
listen to
but
Disney music all day.
each their own love.
Exactly.
Um, I, do you know what? Music is my thing. Music is my passionate thing outside of like AI and work stuff. Music is my thing, and I have a lot of opinions about music because I am very, like I say, my musical taste kind of like halted when I left college,
Yeah,
probably start of uni. I stopped buying a lot of new music. I tend to prefer sort of like music that's actually generated by human beings that can play instruments.
yeah,
That's my kind of start. I'm not into any of this sort of like manufactured boy girl band kind of
yeah.
stuff. Nearly said a swear word then. It's not
It's
my
too
it's
early
not
for
my
that.
bag. I know, a little bit early. It's not my cup of tea. It never has been. So I am like a proper music snob as these things go. I think it is, but then I also think if you take it back to the art thing,
Yeah,
um, art is my second love after music. So if you look at the works, like for example, that Andy Warhol was producing,
yeah,
there was a lot of uproar at the time about how he was just basically taking images of people and things and manipulating with them. And he had the factory, which was basically a ton of assistants.
yeah.
He was directing it, ton of assistants producing. Is AI the same as
Similar to
that? I
that.
mean,
Yeah,
do you know what I mean? It's like if somebody has to be prompting it and giving it something
yeah.
for it to generate the music. It doesn't just magically appear. So is that person behind that curating it for a start? Is it kind of like, are they doing that? Where I think the issue is I think that, Spotify probably should be saying that this is AI
Yeah.
generated. I think there should be something that kind of says,
Even social media
because
is now labeling AI generated content. So
yeah,
why not for music
why
and
not
video?
streaming
Yeah.
services? Yeah. I mean, like with visual stuff, it's kind of, like we talked about before, didn't we? Like you can see
The
when it's
Puppermin advert.
hopefully, when people have got 12 fingers and everything,
Yeah.
it's like it's AI generated content. But with music, it's much more difficult because that again, it's like this art thing, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
interpretive. But I also think that one of the comments in that sort of news piece was that what's happening to genuine in inverted commas
Yeah.
artists, because there's a lot of backlash in the music industry about streaming services
Yeah.
because I'm queen of Spotify, literally listen to it all the time when I'm not talking to you, basically, and I pay my
We were
10,
on for
11
like
quid a
5 hours
month.
yesterday afternoon.
Yeah, a lot of talking yesterday. But I listen to it, like on an average, when I'm not talking to you for 5 hours a day, I will listen to Spotify for probably a good 6 or 7 hours. I
Yeah.
pay like 11 quid a month for it. I don't actually go and buy new music anymore.
No.
So I'm perpetuating the thing that I say that I hate, really, because I'm not buying a CD or an album. I was
Yeah.
definitely a vinyl person. I'm not going out and buying that. And therefore, the royalties from that music that go to the artist are much less. So the more AI stuff that comes into the marketplace and the more people are
Yeah.
listening to it, does that mean that people's listening habits will change?
It's that
It's,
crowding out thing that they were talking about with
mm,
Deezer. And
yeah,
I suppose from I've got two kind of follow-up questions from it. So let's first of all, do you think that if you put on, I don't know, like Spotify's auto-generated playlists, that
mm,
you could spot a AI generated song in the style of a music genre that you like?
probably not.
It's becoming
Probably
quite
not because
complex to be able to find. If an indie rock band is able to make it in this sort of space that is completely AI
yeah,
generated, it does make you think, are people who are tuning into these auto-generated playlists being served this content and then not even realizing that this is an
yeah.
AI generated track?
I'm gonna have to go and listen to it now after we finish talking because
I
it's
haven't
like
listened to it yet. I need to go and listen to it,
I
but
know. Well, I studied music at school, so like I am a trained musician. So
yeah,
it's like part of me is like, would I be able to tell? If I can't, is that bad? You know, is that really embarrassing? Because you know, I'm saying I'm this person and I can't even notice. But then it's like I say, with the whole stuff with Andy Warhol and the art that he produced, you know, people were upset and offended by that at
Yeah.
that time because people's attitude to art was different.
Yeah.
I think we've probably said before in various different aspects of conversations about AI, this stuff isn't going back in the box.
No. Oh
So
yeah,
it's kind of
Pandora's
like,
box is definitely
is
open now.
oh yes, it ain't going back in. So
No.
we have to sort of think about what do we value in terms of, and I say art, and I mean that across like literature, music,
Yeah.
physical art. What do we value about that? Is it, you know, the fact that we get enjoyment from it? Or is it, you know, that it's rewarding for the person producing it? So that kind of conversation, is it? And it's more, it's not really about the technology at all. It's
No.
about like how we feel about the stuff
Yeah.
that we create. And as
Is it
human beings, we
relatable?
create a
Yeah.
lot. Yeah.
And I suppose that then comes on to my second follow-up question is that do you think that AI music, at least in the near future, it may be different further down the line, but at least in the near future, could ever outperform an actual artist? I mean, could you imagine an AI song or artist becoming more popular than a Taylor Swift, for example? Especially when these types of content can't have traditional experiences like a concert or I don't know, or maybe even relatable just even in the news. Like you wouldn't see about a AI generated agent who's dating a American football player, for example. Like, do you think that the popularity of an AI artist could outperform traditional music artists?
I'm laughing that you think that. And I do know who Taylor Swift is,
Yeah.
but you know what I mean? My back catalogue doesn't include Taylor Swift. Um, it's an interesting one because the Gorillas, think about the Gorillas.
Yeah.
So Damon Albarn created this band that was like a virtual band.
Yeah.
So the Gorillas actually toured and they were like, you know, they did a gig and everything. And we that was sort of like that was late 90s, wasn't it? Early
Yeah.
2000s Gorillas sort of first burst onto the scene. And we embraced that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So why
There's the
would we not?
potential.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is a really, really tricky one for me.
It is.
This is harder than what do you think about AI in business kind of stuff because it is such an emotive subject, isn't it?
It is. It is because it's relatable to people at this point, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's not
yeah,
just how can you produce reports quickly or analyze your
yeah.
traditional sales figures and project where your business is going to be in 5 years' time or something like that. It's something that people have opinions on.
I
So
think it is. It's like sat here, my brain is whirring, and I'm thinking of back to experiences that I've had at live music
yeah,
events. So when I was at uni, I used to work for the entertainment committee, so I was literally at a gig practically every night. So I have seen tons of bands.
yeah,
And I'm trying to think about some of the best and some of the worst experiences. And I think one of the best gigs that I ever went to was Prince.
yeah,
Not on my list of things to go to. Got a free ticket when loved it. It was he literally Sheffield Arena, one of the best gigs I ever went to.
yeah,
One of the worst ones probably was Jane's Addiction at the Manchester Arena, whatever the heck it's called now. And they were supporting Nine Inch Nails, and we can go on about hours about that gig, but the quality of the sound quality at that gig was disappointing.
yeah,
So, like for me, the live experience is just as important as that buying a record CD thing.
yeah,
So it's like I buy into that whole culture of liking a band and you know like going and seeing them on tour, buying the merch and all the rest of it. So if you've got this sort of virtual thing that doesn't really exist in the real world, so to speak,
yeah.
for me, part of that experience is missing.
No, I agree. I mean, I remember once going to see John Mayer in London,
Mm,
and I I don't like I said I don't really follow traditional music in a sense. Like most of the stuff I listen to during the day is music from the Disney parks and
yeah,
films and different things like that. In my spare time, don't get me wrong, I do listen to things like country music, for example, like
yeah.
modern country, like country rock and stuff like that.
Mm.
Um, but I'd gone to see John Mayer, and the supporting artist came on. I was like, this guy is really good, Newton Faulkner.
Mm.
and I absolutely loved his music, and I've been following him ever since. But
Yeah.
like, you wouldn't get that sort of experience from going to see an AI concert.
No. And this is the thing, it's like this is the thing that sort of moves us about music, isn't it? You sort of like, I can't remember where me and the other half went. We went to see Sonic Youth, I think it was. No, was it Sonic Youth? Can't remember. It was somebody like that. And we
Yeah,
saw them at the Castlefield Bowl. And it was the same thing. The support act came on. And the first sort of, they're just like starting up. And I'm like, I'm not sure about this. And then
yeah,
literally by 2 songs in, I'm like, I love these
yeah,
guys. And
exactly.
I think it wasn't Sonic Youth. Who was it? Anyway, memory like a sieve for gigs because I've been to so many. But I wouldn't have experienced them if I hadn't have gone to that gig.
Yeah,
And it was the Pixies. That's who it was. It wasn't Sonic Youth. But if I'd not gone to buy that ticket and gone to that gig, I would have not experienced that. And I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's
yeah,
like it moves you to a different place. It takes you in a different direction. It's like the whole Prince thing.
yeah.
I mean, I would have never ever paid to go and see Prince in a million years because
No,
he was not on my list of things, people that I wanted to see. And as it was, like I say, that gig was probably one of the best that I've ever been to in terms of showmanship and stuff. And it's just sort of
yeah,
like, without him being able to physically tour, I wouldn't have experienced that. So I think it
exactly.
is that it's not just it's like with the cyber attacks, isn't it? It's just not the initial thing. It's not the we've got AI generated music out on Spotify. It's the experience around that
Exactly.
and the other
And
bits
it's
that are
how
attached to it.
you can bring people together in that sort of sense. I mean, I remember again similar scenario to John Mayer and Newton Faulkner. I went to go and see uh, Aerosmith at Hyde Park
Mhm.
Calling, and the support act was Chris Cornell.
Yeah.
Like you don't expect to go to these places and then discover these sorts of other artists that you've maybe not
No.
listened to before, and maybe to an extent, yes, with AI generated playlists with Spotify and Apple Music, yes, you can discover new artists in that way,
Mm.
but it's not that same sort of, going back to a
No.
phrase we used earlier, transformative experience that
No.
you sort of receive.
I mean, there's been a lot recently in the sort of like music news and stuff that I've sort of seen about the anniversary of Live Aid.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like, I am a massive, massive Queen fan.
Oh yeah.
And those 20 minutes of Queen being on stage was like probably one of the best gigs that I never got to.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I was too young at the time. Even I was too young.
I love
You know,
rewatching that. And
but
even
that,
oh, what's the film? Bohemian Rhapsody, the Queen
yeah, yeah,
film. How they recreate it in that was really good
yeah.
as well. Anyway,
I watched
off
that and
topic.
expected to be really disappointed by that film, but I wasn't. I loved it.
Yeah.
Being the Queen fan that I am. But I think if you think about that whole experience of Live Aid, yes, there are a lot of people have issues with it now, the way that it portrayed what happens in Africa and stuff, and I
Yeah.
can completely understand that. But if you look at that as a cultural event of significance, I mean, we're talking like 30 years ago,
Yeah.
it's 30 years ago, 40 years ago, a
Uh,
long time ago.
yeah.
It's sort of like that is still talked about now. And if you think
Yeah.
about all those people, that gig was not just focused in the UK, there was like a parallel event in the
Yeah. In the
US and it was all
US.
live streamed. None of that would happen if you had a virtual artist because they wouldn't be there.
No, and you wouldn't create that same sort of experience for the crowd and
Mm.
stuff like that. So
Although I do think the bit about like AI generated playlists
yeah.
is really important
Oh yeah, and I
because
think that
that,
that's a good way to be able to discover new music,
yeah,
especially if you're
yeah,
traditionally like focused on a particular
stuck
genre.
in your ways, AJ, like I am.
Yeah, well, that's one way of wording
Stuck in your like punk
it.
rock metal type sort of vein and just don't like I'm blinkered, I don't come out of it.
It goes back
But
to that
actually
sort
that
of radio scenario, though, doesn't it?
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
you sometimes listen to the radio and you discover new artists. You sometimes listen to an AI
yeah.
generated playlist and you discover new
You will
artists
find
or different types of music that you may be interested in.
yeah.
So,
You look at my CDs because I've still got all my CDs in our front room, and you look at it, and there was a period when I worked in Rotherham for Parcel Force, and we used to listen to the radio, and you can tell this period of time. If you look at the CD singles that I
yeah.
bought during that time, there were some really random ones that didn't fit into the rest of my sort of beautifully curated metal rock
Yeah.
industrial type playlist thing, and there's like random stuff like Rialto or whatever, and some odd things that were on the radio all the time. But actually, because I was listening to them and hearing them, I was like, oh, I really like that. And I
Yeah.
think, as much as I laugh about my own sort of like musical restrictions, my thing has always been, if it makes me tap my feet,
Yeah.
I kind of like it, and it tends to be a certain sort of section of music. But I think the AI generated playlist is a good thing, but AI artists, I'm kind of not there yet.
I'm gonna have to listen to some of the songs
Yeah,
just to be able to see. I think now, just as an example, because
yeah,
I've heard some AI generated kind of like, oh, what's the word for it? Like mock take on certain tracks, sort of thing. There is
yeah.
a word I'm looking for, but and those are fun. But that's all they are. They're fun. They're not like something that I would then tune into over and over and over and over
It's like
again.
the stuff they pipe into lifts and stuff, isn't it?
Yeah,
And like department stores, like the badly copied, because they're trying to get around copyright. They get
yeah,
somebody else to sing the song, kind of thing. It kind of makes me think of that. It kind of makes me think of this manufactured music type
yeah,
stuff that is not got the soul in it, I suppose.
yeah. Let's move
Mm,
on to our
good one.
last news story, though, because I feel like we've been talking about music for a while. Um, And this is actually a 24 IT news announcement. We're actually hiring for a new position. So we're hiring for an outbound call specialist who will be working with people like myself in marketing and Sarah and Jordan, as well as our account management team and also our senior management to speak with leads and businesses about how we can support them to succeed, as well as adopt new services and solutions to be able to improve productivity, efficiency, and just feel supported and secure as well. The job listing is currently available through our LinkedIn. It's for a minimum of 20 hours, with the ability for it to be a hybrid role if needed. And we're looking for someone with at least a couple of years of proven experience with roles such as telesales and sales and things like that. So if that is you or someone you know, feel free to reach out or head over to that listing over on LinkedIn and feel free to apply. Um, Now though, we're going to move over into our 24 tech tips news story. 24 tech tips topic. That's what I'm trying to say. There's too many T's. Which, funnily enough, myself and Sarah were discussing AI sourced answers to results in platforms like ChatGPT and Google only yesterday, part of that 5 hour discussion. And
Yeah.
as part of that, we ran a quick test about some of these common answers that you could get out of these platforms. No joke, it broke me. I could not stop laughing. Sarah thought I was having a fit. And it's because we were
Yeah.
sourced as one of the answers.
Yeah.
We were a source of one of the answers of this test trial that I was doing of asking certain questions to ChatGPT, and it was for this article that I wanted to talk about today. So, anyway, let's have a look about what IT downtime, which is today's topic, really is. Now,
Mm,
IT downtime could be anything from a single user being unable to access a critical system to be able to accomplish their role, or it could be something that impacts a wider business. That could be a critical piece of infrastructure that prevents you from processing sales, or for example, if it was in manufacturing, it could be stopping you from being able to produce products. Now, understandably, because there are many different industries and different sizes of businesses, downtime and the cost of downtime can vary quite drastically. A
mm,
recent study by Samsung revealed that small to medium businesses in the UK lose nearly £300,000 annually due to outdated or unreliable technology, which results then in downtime. But then on mobile device failures alone, this costs businesses as much as £226,808, which is an oddly specific number, but that is directly from Samsung themselves. But as operating systems and older hardware become end of life, especially with Windows 10 being end of life in only 104 days, that's your reminder, by the way, it's incredibly important that businesses ensure that their devices are fit for purpose. And that this is exactly why we conduct regular technology alignment reviews with all of our
mm,
partners to make sure that the technology that they're using, regardless of role, and this goes back to the is your hardware fit for purpose and hardware specs that we were talking about a few weeks back,
mm.
but is that fit for what your business needs it for? Now, the UK Cyber Breaches Survey suggests that the average cost of downtime for a small business can be anything as much as £3,350 per hour, which is massive numbers, massive numbers.
Mm.
But 92% of businesses are taking 24 hours or more to recover from this type of downtime. Now, like I said, downtime could range depending on the type of business. In manufacturing, this could cost between 30,000 and 1.5 million per hour. Widespread impacts on healthcare industries, for example, could cost as much as £18,700 per minute. And of course, as we spoke about earlier with the Marks and Spencer cyber attack and the downtime on their systems as a result, that has cost them £300 million in lost profit. A 2023 report from Unisys said that 49% of business employees lose between 1 and 5 hours per week of productivity due to IT issues and inadequate support measures in place to get them back up and running quickly. This is why it's essential to partner with a trusted provider such as ourselves, who work to understand your business, what pain points you have, what's important to you, what your growth goals are, and then align this with proactive monitoring and maintenance, security and compliance, all of which aligns with industry standards such as Cyber Essentials, as well as the new Cyber Security and Resilience Bill and the Cyber Growth Action Plan that are coming into the UK. And also rapid response and expertise from trained certified engineers is something that you can have on hand and available to you. We target as a business a 15-minute first response across our entire customer base, with 98% of tickets resolved within the first hour. And in the case of one of our largest customers, 82% of their tickets taking less than 15 minutes to resolve. All of which results in a consistent customer satisfaction rating across our business of over 96% annually. In fact, I had a look at this morning of the 30-day average for this. 98.8%, which is 20% higher than our entire industry average, which is absolutely brilliant to see. Well done, all of the guys out there on our main help desk floor, as well as our guys down in Cambly and also our international office, for just such brilliant numbers and brilliant satisfaction. We share a lot of the comments, of course, through social media that people give to us, and it's great to see the guys doing such an absolutely brilliant job. But I suppose, Sarah, leading on from this, have you ever been impacted in another business that you've been in by downtime that's prevented you from being able to do your job?
Yeah, I mean, I've been on the receiving end like the guys, the engineers have had. So, that was my day to day for 18 and a half years. So I absolutely applaud them for their
Yeah.
stats, because that is phenomenal
Absolutely
achievement.
massive. Absolutely massive.
But I've also been sat in that position where the company that I'd worked for hadn't paid the broadband bill. By some small oversight. It wasn't like on purpose. It was an absolute accounting mess up. But we were literally sat there as a support team. And I was saying to you earlier, one by one, everybody's like, I can't get on the internet, can't get on the internet. And it just literally ripped through the whole office.
Yeah.
And then we're like, now what do we do?
Yeah.
Because we were supporting people, we were supporting the manufacturers who were losing, however many £1 million a second kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's just sort of like it being in that situation and not being able to do your job.
Yeah.
Is slightly terrifying, because it's kind of like if you think as one person sat there and the impact that they have, it's like most of the things that we talk about, isn't it? It's like this one immediate small action has such a knock on.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And I think it didn't last that long. I seem to remember, it was a long time ago. I seem to remember quite a few of us ended up going home and working from home, because obviously we'd got our own internet connections and stuff. But I just remember the sweaty palm feeling and that moment of panic.
What are we going to do?
Because it's like, what do we actually do?
Yeah.
It's like what's happened was the first thing, because at that time we got an IT team on site. So we'd got like our IT guys were like, we've got no idea what happened.
Running around.
Nobody looked at the obvious that we'd not paid the bill kind of thing.
And that's when you think it's a technical issue, don't you?
Oh God, yeah. But this is the thing, and I think it's kind of like we overlooked the obvious,
Yeah.
which was they've cut us off basically. I mean, we were back on once, once it all got sorted out, it was paid really quickly, everything was back up and running, but there was that initial moment of panic.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of that is the one that sticks in my mind. Obviously, being a sole trader, I've had a couple of times where my Mac, touch wood, it won't do it now, has decided to be slightly temperamental. Probably because I've got far too many tabs open, it's overheated, and it's like, I am not playing this game.
Yeah.
But obviously, if that as a sole trader can be an easy fix, it can be
Yeah.
just a case of switch it off, let it cool down again, and then boot it up again, and everything's fine. But if you're due to go into a call with somebody, if you are like doing a training session or whatever, that can have quite a detrimental effect, because you don't have somebody to pass it on to.
Exactly.
If you're the only person in your business, you can't say, well, can you just look at this? And to be honest, how many people in smaller businesses have the facilities to be able to mitigate those
The
circumstances? And
reality
I was
is not
thinking,
many. If
no.
the problem that many small to medium sized businesses have is that they don't have the adequate support in place if something
Yeah,
happens, or they
yeah,
may not be aligned with a partner such as ourselves who understands what is critical to them. Like,
yeah.
if, for example, a small to medium sized business requires the internet for their primary software that they use,
Mm,
ensuring that they have a backup line in case their primary line goes down would
mm,
be an essential thing that they would be
yeah, yeah,
looking for. And
yeah,
we've spoken with many businesses in certain areas of our local region, not naming any names, who have experienced issues with their internet on quite a regular basis this past few years,
mm,
and
yeah,
have then required uh, a backup solution to be able to get them back up and running quickly. And we've
yeah,
actually been looking at things like Starlink solutions with them, for example,
yeah,
where when their primary line goes down and they cannot get another line from another provider into their business, they can switch over to satellite internet very quickly,
yeah,
very easily. And in one case of someone that we were speaking with recently, what that would like put this in for, they'd not even noticed that they were on the backup line. We actually had to
no.
say to them, "We're going to move you back over to your primary line now." Oh, we were on the backup line.
Yeah, that's like mirroring software, isn't it? Because I
Yeah,
think that for
high
a while
availability.
wasn't a big thing. So like high availability systems were only sort of like affordable by big multinational
Yeah,
corporate businesses at one point, and that kind of has been democratized, and it's much more affordable now.
yeah,
But at one point, I remember I can't remember who the customer was, and I probably wouldn't say who it was anyway. But they'd got high availability system, and we had to switch. I mean, we physically didn't do it because they were working with like another provider, but we were the people that let the provider know that there was an issue because they'd phoned us, and then it's like they need to switch.
yeah,
And that switch process is done, it's instantaneous. I mean, they hardly noticed, I think, that something had happened.
yeah,
But it's like that sort of stuff helps prevent it. So it helps prevent your downtime. But then it's kind of like that whole sort of cost and benefit question,
yeah,
isn't it? It's sort of like things are a lot more affordable now, but sometimes I wonder whether people actually realise that there are these options available, kind of like for I want to say the lower end of the market, being like normal human beings
yeah,
instead of these people that have got like tons and tons and tons of money and stuff. But yeah, things like that I've experienced quite a few times in lots of different ways. I think being on the receiving end
yeah,
of people experiencing that is kind of, you think on your feet really quickly. I mean, the engineers will know, you literally, it's kind of like you've got this like second extra sense or something. It's like you
yeah.
just kind of, it
It's it's
flicks in what you need to do.
it's about understanding as well. Is that like if we had a logistics firm, for example, who
Mm,
said, "Oh, my printer's not working," like for the majority of other places, like you, I don't know, your law firm down the road or something like
yeah,
that,
it's not
my
an issue.
printer's not working, probably not essential. But for a logistics firm who then says, my printer's not working, that means that they can't print labels. They
Yeah,
can't then get orders out the door. They
Yeah.
can't get like stuff onto the back of a van and get it delivered for the
Mm.
following day like they're promising their customers. And
Yeah.
the guys out here take pride in understanding what each of our customers' primary needs are
Mm.
and making sure that if Joe Blogg's logistics customer calls up and says, my printer's not working, right, okay, we know the main things that we need to look for. We know the main processes that we need to go through to be
Mm.
able to see if that's not working. We know what the escalation level is and who to
Mm.
contact if it's a third-party issue. All
Yeah.
of that is quickly and easily accessible, and they have the knowledge and skills to be able to act as quickly as possible to get those people up and running. And we also have other processes in place internally as well. So if a logistics customer phones up and says my printer's not working, that doesn't go to our line 1 engineers. It goes
No.
straight into our line 2 queue,
Yeah.
because we know that that's a priority for those businesses and that we
Yeah.
don't want them waiting for someone to become available in the line 1 queue.
Yeah, I think there's lots of different elements to this, isn't there? So there's the stuff like that, that is the things where things go down.
Yeah.
So like servers, hardware,
Yeah.
not paying your internet bill, that kind of stuff. But then there's also the other bit that you were talking about, which is sort of like older machinery.
Yeah.
And we work in an industry, sadly, where things do blow up. Things do go bang every now and again. Like components in equipment will literally
Yeah.
go. And you can't plan for that,
No.
because it's like, Windows end of life. Yes, we've got a finite period of
Dates. Yeah.
time. We know we need to
October
do this.
14th.
Yeah, yeah. Glad you remember. But it's just like, if what your server goes bang, which
Yeah.
can happen, obviously not as much maybe, but if for example there is something that
Yeah.
happens like that hardware failure,
What is your backup?
that's
What is your redundancy?
yeah,
How
yeah,
quickly can you get back up and running?
exactly. And it's not like, we were joking the other week, weren't we, about like one of the Marks and Spencer suppliers going back to paper and pen.
Yeah.
That isn't an option for a lot of people
No.
anymore. It's like
my son's
uh,
school this morning sent a message into the app that we have for the school saying the oven door blew up. We're having sandwiches today. Okay, that's your backup. But like, you can't do that if your server blows up. You need to make sure that you have proper processes in place, proper redundancies in place that can help your business get back up and running quickly. You can't just say, all right, well, sandwiches. It just doesn't work.
it's making me laugh this, because a couple of years ago my washing machine door did the same thing.
Yeah.
So like we put a load of washing in, and my washing machine is like, it's German, so we've got a Miele washing machine. It talks to you in German. It says "Willkommen" when you switch it on. So like, it's like,
Brilliant.
reliable engineering and all the rest of it. All the things that we say about German engineering and stuff. And this one particular day, my partner opened the washing machine door and he went, "Oh," and I'm like, and he messaged me and he said, "There's a problem with the washing machine." I'm like, "What?" And you come downstairs and you've got like an outer portion to the door,
Yeah.
then this inner bowed bit. The inner bit had shattered,
Oh my
literally
God.
shattered. And we're like, what has gone off here? And you can imagine two fully grown adults who both work in
Yeah.
technology
Like,
stood there, like in complete and utter dismay at this like shattered inner
yeah.
washing machine door. But I mean, for us, that's not business critical.
No.
But it's like, it's not something we had ever planned for.
No.
It's like, you don't buy a washing machine and think, "Oh yeah, well, we'll have it for 6 years and then the inner door will bloody explode on us."
Yeah.
It's not what you think about. And I think that's the point, isn't it? It's like there's so much that can go wrong that constitutes downtime in a business. We're not just talking about, like you say, like the obvious stuff, like lack of internet connection, like Wi-Fi
Yeah.
problems, even cyber, sort of incidents and whatever. There's all these things, but there can be unexpected exploding oven doors or washing machine doors. There can be like
Exactly.
hardware failures. There can be like things degrade over time.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that we do well with our clients is this technology alignment sort of check thing, because
Yeah.
this
Making
piece of
sure
work
that
goes through
everyone is
everything.
using the equipment that will serve them
Mm,
right and that
yeah,
it won't hinder them, for lack of a better
yeah.
phrase, from performing day-to-day tasks.
And we've
And
talked about like us being like the fifth emergency service, haven't
yeah.
we, kind of thing. And it makes me smile when every time Mike says it, but it's so true, because you go to work And it's like, when I was working in my tech career, I would switch my laptop on every morning. I would hope that it would work every day. And you go in and you do this stuff, and it's like, one day you switch it on and it just like, just no.
Yeah.
And then it's like, but what happens then? And it's like, because we're encouraging people to go through these checks, we're actually making them think about where the vulnerabilities are. And I don't mean that from a cyber sense, but from an actual sort of like hardware, software.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, if you can prepare for the majority of this, you actually have less downtime. So yes, you might have to switch a server out, but if you're doing that in a controlled method,
it's planned ahead of time, and you have
yes, planned
redundancies in
maintenance,
place, and
you can bring everything down around it, because a lot of the time these things need to be done in the right way, otherwise things get temperamental, don't they? We think of machinery and technology as like so black and white, but actually I think sometimes it's just as finicky as we are as humans. But you can do that. You've got a finite period of time, you're going to be down for this reason, and you can do all the things that you need to do, and that is kind of a more manageable sort of time frame, isn't it? Because you know what you're doing. Whereas if server goes bang and then you're like, well, what's happened here? That as human beings, the initial reaction is going to be panic, isn't it? And like people are going to run around like headless chickens, and then eventually sanity checks, come in and everything. And so what you're doing, but there is this bigger period of time where you're having to manage stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that's, it's one of the things you can't prepare for, but you can.
And how we word it to people is that we feel that incident response and disaster recovery are an essential part of any overall IT strategy. They have to exist separate to it, but they also have to integrate in with it as part of this technology alignment plan, as part of understanding where your business wants to be, whether it's 12 months, 3 years, or 5 years down the line. And this is part of the reason why we have a VCIO who works with businesses to be able to understand what they want to do, what they want to accomplish, and help plan for their future, as well as part of their wider account management piece. So it's incredibly important that businesses understand what downtime could mean to them. And it's not just important for thinking about the businesses on a whole, but also per department and per person within that business. If you were without a critical function within your business for hours, days at a time, could you still operate? And that's the main thing that people need to be able to consider.
Yeah, and I think people sometimes don't think about that. I mean, we've talked about the very obvious one, the printer in the warehouse ceases to exist, and then you can't print off your labels and stuff. But what about if you can't invoice people? What if like something's happened with your accounts team, something's happened in there, they can't work properly? What if your customer service team can't take orders? And it's not necessarily always about big catastrophic failures, is it? Sometimes it's the smaller things. It might be that I don't know, a Windows update affects a particular piece of software and that impacts a certain department. It could be that you've got an older piece of machinery that requires a specific component of Windows, and that gets updated and it changes something. It's like things like that
the old manufacturing systems that still run Windows 98 or something like that. It's like
those DLL files don't exist anymore, and it's all gone very wrong. It's like that kind of thing. We've all lived through that. I mean, most of the, I know I definitely have, but it's just sort of like some of those things you don't. It sounds like again that we're being. I was saying before about us not being over dramatic. We're not, because we think about these things a lot of the time because we've actually lived through them.
Informational. It's like sharing best practices more than anything. It's not about scare tactics. It's not about this is what will happen to you if you don't do this. It's like, no, here's the information. Do with it what you will, sort of thing.
And I think as well in this sort of like this day and age, and I am sounding like a grandma, but it's totally different from 26 years ago when Grandma Steinhöfel's here again. But if you think about how much, and I always go back to this, how much we rely on technology now, how integrated everything is. It's like we have stuff on our phones now that we probably wouldn't have had 25 years ago, and how that integrates into our business. Those are the questions that most people don't ask. Don't think about, because they're in the business doing the day-to-day of their business, and it's not that they're being remiss or anything. It's just that they're so engrossed and sort of like involved in running a business they don't
Yeah.
often have the time to step back and go, well, what would happen if the printer in the warehouse went bang? And that's what we're here to do, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
kind of, we're here to sit there and go, well, actually, have you thought about this?
I've got a brilliant comment here from
Cool.
Buzz, who must be tuned into the live stream. Buzz, I thought you were on holiday. Why are you commenting on the live stream? Anyway, but I want to read this out because I think that this perfectly relates into like what we're talking about. He says, we've come across businesses that have PLC hardware that is circa 30 years old and really needs
Mm,
upgrading as parts are now not accessible and uh, parts are not accessible now and find skills that have the experience with old hardware and coding. Yet
yeah,
they don't and won't consider changing it as it's
yeah,
working and it has been for 30 years. I suppose it's the whole, it's why change it, it's not broken, don't fix it sort of
yeah,
thing.
yeah,
But then they become super surprised when it does fail. And hey, there's now no parts available and this, that, and the other. Like, it's going
yeah.
to take weeks to get the machine back up and running with newer hardware. That costs time and it costs money. And it's a perfect representation of
Yeah.
the sorts of things that we're talking about, where you need to
Mm,
understand what downtime means to you as a business. Will this one piece of machinery cause
mm,
significant downtime for your business because it's not in line with modern standards, and that you cannot get parts and you cannot get training and
mm.
you cannot, like, it's brilliant example there, Buzz, by the way. He says he's
Yeah, I
back at
like
work this
that.
week, actually, so that's why he's not on holiday anymore, he's back at work. But no, it's really good example of what we're saying,
Mm.
but from a different industry point of view.
Yeah, I mean, manufacturing industry is so good at this sort of like, we will keep using this thing because it works. And I totally understand why, because having worked in and around the manufacturing industry for a long time, you kind of, if you've got a piece of kit that works, it's not just like taking a laptop out of the accounts department or something. It's
Yeah,
like your whole manufacturing process is sort of centered around, like a piece of machinery, whatever it is. It doesn't really matter what it is in
yeah,
this sort of scenario, but it's centered around that thing. So for you to have downtime, yes, a lot of places will have machine maintenance time, but that's probably not as long, and it's not as involved. If you've got this very specific piece of equipment that somebody knows how to use inside out and back to front, you've also
yeah,
got then the training time.
yeah,
You've also got then to think about, does this new piece of equipment with a new version of software and Windows and everything fit with everything else that we're using?
yeah,
So this changing this one particular thing out, while we're sat there going, it's really obvious, that's really old, you need to swap it out, kind of thing. There's more to it than just that one thing. And I think this is the beauty and the curse of a lot of the things that we talk about,
exactly.
because although they sound like they're a very sort of like contained finite thing, then they're actually not, are they? And
No,
this is why you need that sort of like extra pair of eyes coming in to say, have you thought about
yeah,
this?
and understanding
But
what
yeah,
you're wanting to achieve as a business as a whole.
yeah,
So, no, I think it's a
yeah.
really good point. Like I say, thank you very much for that comment, Buzz, because I think it
Thank you,
really,
boss.
really worked in relevant to the topic of what downtime could mean to a business.
Hmm.
And yeah, so lastly this week, thank you very much for that on the IT downtime. But we have been speaking recently that we were putting on an AI event for local businesses, which actually happened last week. And I won't cover absolutely everything that we discussed because it will take another hour, and I don't want to take another hour because I've just realised that we're already over the 1 hour mark. You are making me want to go for more than that 90-minute mark now, aren't you?
Yeah, we're kind of in there for the duration now, aren't
Yes.
we?
But I wanted to cover a little bit about some of the topics that we discussed
Hmm.
around just general things around AI and automation implementation and pain points that people were
Hmm.
experiencing. It's some of the topics that were discussed included things like complex data control systems that people had in place, too many processes and procedures across
Yeah.
different platforms. Repetition of common tasks was one that was discussed as well, even
Hmm.
down to things like filtration of inbound emails because people get so many emails on a daily basis and they don't know
Yeah.
what is and isn't important. Client onboarding, regular reporting
Hmm.
and statistics, and much more besides. We covered all these topics as part of this discussion with local businesses. And it was really interesting to see people gain that understanding of, oh, we can use AI and automation solutions to be able to help with some of these, like filtering out inbound emails into the business to what is critical and what is not critical, what is marketing spam and what isn't. Sorry for people who receive our marketing spam. It's not spam, it's educational, I promise. If you do want to be able to receive some of our educational content, we also include links to these podcasts as well. So feel free to be able to message me and we can get you added to the mailing list. Anyway, it was really interesting to be able to have those discussions with people, because you could see that kind of light bulb moment for people.
Yeah.
As they were like, oh, I could use an AI solution or an automation solution to quickly do that. Like, people were saying that they were spending sometimes hours on an evening listening to a Teams call that they'd had so they could do minutes and then share that throughout members of the team. It's like, no, we have a solution that can automatically transcribe minutes based on the people who are in that meeting, and also create follow-up tasks for people.
Yeah.
No longer do you have to spend 3 hours listening through a call bit by bit when you can automatically have those minutes generated for you and those actions. So it was really good to be able to see those kind of light bulb moments, like I say.
Yeah.
But also linking on from the topic that we discussed last week about the dangers of third-party AI solutions, 90% of people in the room thought that their employees were using third-party tools that were beyond their control. But more critically, as part of that, nobody in the room could guarantee that their employees only had access to the data that they needed to do their roles effectively. Meaning that Jim in sales or Helen in HR could access Susan in accounts' financial records, or vice versa. And it's, especially when you're looking at adopting AI solutions, such as Microsoft Copilot, for example, it's important to understand the data that you hold within your business and who has access to it. Because you do not want Jim in sales saying, provide me the HR records for Susan in accounts or something like that. I keep using these same 3 names. But it's an important consideration, because when you're assessing the security of that data, say, for example, God forbid that you suffer a cyber attack, and the target person within your business is Helen in HR, if she has access to Susan accounts' financial records, cyber criminals have an easy path to be able to get all of the data across your business. So that was a really interesting topic to be able to discuss, and just is actually discussions that we now have ongoing with a couple of businesses following that. So it's, I suppose, the question for anyone who is listening today, leading on from this event, which we are looking to put on more of these, we may even turn some of them into webinars as well. Are there any pain points or even repetitive tasks or things within your business that you feel could be improved through AI and automation solutions? And do you feel that your data within your business is segmented and siloed and secure so that only the members of your team have access to the data that they need and nothing more besides? So if anyone wants to discuss these or any other topics, or would like to come to any of our future events or our webinars, feel free to reach out to myself, Sarah, or any members of our team. I know Jordan's in the chat as well. Tony's always happy to be able to receive messages from people. And if you just want to discuss these, like we've had some people reach out to us who couldn't make it to the talk and have now said, look, we'd like to discuss this sort of thing with you because we want to implement XYZ type of solution, but we don't know how. Like, can we sit down and discuss these sorts of things with you? And I believe actually Tony, who is in the office today, is actually sat down with someone for a meeting about these sorts of topics at the moment. So anyone who wants to be able to find out more about these things, always feel free to reach out. More than happy to discuss these with you.
Definitely.
And I think that's kind of about it for today, Sarah. We're not going to run into that 90-minute mark.
Should have tried harder. Should have tried harder.
Should have tried harder. Maybe next time you're on. I'd say Sarah is always welcome here as a backup reserve. And I know I've had a few people reach out to me who also weren't available today, unfortunately, who've offered to be backup reserves in the future as well. And I also wanted to apologise before the podcast was over this week about the audio quality on my side of last week's show. I knew what the issue was in advance. I'd tested it. It didn't seem like it was an issue, and then we went live, and I listened to it afterwards, and I was like, I'm really disappointed in myself. But
You're a human being after all, AJ Love. You know,
exactly,
it's like kind of these things happen, and I think that's kind of a lesson to us all, isn't it? In some
I'm a
respects.
perfectionist at the end of the day, and if it
No,
doesn't
you are.
sound how I want it to be, then it's like I get really disappointed with myself. The issue, for anyone wondering, is that I had multiple audio sources input into the software that I use, and that because there were multiple, they were conflicting with each other, which caused an echo on the primary audio channel, which was this giant microphone that I use every week. So I did order another microphone. It just didn't arrive in time for that show. So if we have anyone in the office, and you're always welcome to come to the office, by the way, joining us for a podcast, we have a secondary microphone, not quite this size, not the size of my head, but another secondary microphone that we can get proper audio quality out going forwards. But yes, thank you very much, Sarah, for joining me this week.
Okay.
Thank you for people who have been tuning in, listening along. Thank you, Buzz, for your question as well. I've just noticed he put another comment in. And this is how I'm going to close today's show. It's about future proofing. It costs less now than it will do in the future. And that's a brilliant way to be able to put this. I will be back again next week with another show. I will be back again next week with another show as well. I'll be back again next week with another show where we will be discussing the Windows 10 end of life date and what that means for businesses who are still using these older operating systems. Thank you very much again to everyone, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon. See you later.